What's going on, duelists? It's your boy Nick, bringing you today on the channel a small update to my Dinomorphia deck profile for the post-Age of Overlord format. For those of you new to the channel, welcome. My name is Nick. We do Yu-Gi-Oh content mainly focused around rogue and casual decks alike. If that's the kind of Yu-Gi-Oh that you're interested in, then I highly encourage for you to smash that subscribe button. We are working our way to 1,500 subscribers, and I need your help to get there. So Dinomorphia is a deck that I recently updated on my channel a couple months ago, around when Duelist Nexus released. However, since then, the deck's kind of flown a bit under the radar, both, in literal terms and as far as the meta is speaking. But there was a card that released in Age of Overlord, which is an out-of-archetype card. It belongs to Labrynth, actually, and it is called Aras the Labrynth Butler. Excuse me while I get this to focus really quickly. There we go. Now, this card is brand new out of Agov, and personally, while it is a Labrynth monster, I honestly feel like this card works so much better in other trap decks. I might be the only one that thinks that. Maybe that's just a bad hot take, but you guys let me know down in the comments below. I really, like, as good as this card is, I just felt like Labrynth really doesn't need it in the grand scheme because they have their furniture cards, which effectively do the same thing. I just feel like this card is better suited in other trap decks. And the reason for that is because it allows you to activate traps from your hand. Well, excuse me, let me rephrase that. You can set a normal trap from your hand, and then once you set it, you can activate it the same turn it was set. Now that's huge, especially for a deck like Dinomorphia that focuses on traps. So, for those of you unfamiliar with the list, Dinomorphia is pretty much a full-blown control deck. They strive to get their life points as low as they possibly can, and it's one of the few decks in the game that capitalizes off the fact that they get their life points to such dangerously low amounts. So like I said, this list isn't too much different from my list from a few months ago, so I'm going to speed through the profile very briefly, because to be honest, not much has changed, and in the grand scheme, the deck really hasn't needed any change because it's been functioning quite well, in my personal opinion. So we're going to start off with the monster lineup first. This is going to be a brief run through of the profile. It's a 40-card main deck. We're on a playset of Dinomorphia Theresia, which is effectively the deck starter. Upon normal or special summon, you can set a Dinomorphia trap directly from your deck to your spell trap zone. Then if your life points are 2,000 or less, Theresia will gain 500 attack permanently. Now what's cool about this is this effect cannot be stopped by cards like Ash Blossom because she specifically sets the trap from deck. You are not adding anything from deck to hand, nor are you summoning from deck. You're simply taking a trap from your deck and setting it to your side of the field. Unfortunately, that trap cannot be activated to the turn it's set, but that's still okay. Theresia's an amazing starter. Not to mention, she also floats upon destruction, whether that's by battle or by card effect. If this card is destroyed, you can banish any trap from your graveyard for cost, to then special summon a level 4 or lower Dinomorphia monster from your grave, except a copy for herself. So overall, she's an amazing starter for the theme, given that the theme only has 2 main deck monsters, the second one being a playset of Diplos, also a dark level 4 dinosaur monster, and upon normal or special summon, he allows you to send a Dinomorphia card from your deck to the graveyard. So you can Foolish Burial any Dinomorphia card you want. You could even bin the Theresia, because just like Theresia, when Diplos is destroyed, whether that's by battle or card effect, you can banish a trap from your graveyard, any trap, keep that in mind, to then target a level 4 or lower Dinomorphia monster in your grave, except himself, and special summon that monster, which is obviously really, really strong. And then as far as there are no Dinomorphia spells, but all the traps that they have, a lot of them do have graveyard effects, which is again why Diplos, on summon, lets you Foolish Burial a Dinomorphia card. So together, those are the 2 main deck Dinomorphias. They're very, very powerful. And also the deck's really budget as well. Like if you just want to get into Yu-Gi-Oh! And have a very cheap deck you can throw together that, isn't straight cheeks, for lack of a better word, Dinomorphia honestly is a really, really strong deck, especially when we get into their extra deck, because you'll see what the payoff is for you getting your life points so low. But anyway, moving on with the monster lineup, a playset of Ash Blossoms, pretty much a staple in this format. I mean, there's so much diversity in this format that it's very hard to pinpoint what hand traps are great. So I think in a format like this, you just want to play hand traps that are more well-rounded. I think cards like Ash are just a staple in this format because Ash can just address so many different things, given that you're going to come across so many different decks. Now moving on, After Ash, we have 2 copies of the brand new Aras, the Labrynth Butler. Now, I'll talk more in detail about what this card enables for this deck after we get through the profile, but just understand that she is a dark, level 6 Fiend effect monster with 1500 attack and 2500 defense, and she states that during the main phase quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard for cost, to then special summon a Labrynth monster, or set a normal trap from your hand. The set normal trap can be activated this turn, which is obviously nuts, so you can just pitch her from hand, set a normal trap from your hand, and then the trap can be used the same turn it was set. And if that wasn't crazy enough, when your opponent activates a card or effect in response to your card or effect activation of a normal trap or a Labrynth card, except Aras, quick effect, you can activate this effect in the graveyard, special summon this card. So that's a lot of text. All you really need to know is that she can pitch herself from the hand or field to grave to allow you to activate or set a trap from your hand, normal trap only, from your hand, and then that normal trap can be activated that same turn it was set, which is obviously very, very strong. And then in addition to that, while she's in the graveyard, if your opponent activates any cards or effects in response to your normal traps, the Aras can actually special summon herself out of the graveyard, and her being level 6 is actually relevant for this particular list. So we played 2 copies of Aras. Very amazing card in my opinion, especially for a deck such as this. Again, we'll get into more detail as to why Aras is so cracked after we finish the profile. But moving on, 2 copies of Wannabe, pretty much the same from the previous list. The Wannabe is pretty straightforward. During the end phase, it's either player's end phase, you send this card from your hand or field to grave. Then you can excavate cards from the top of your deck equal to the number of your opponent's unused spell trap zones. And if you can set an excavated trap to your field, but then send it to the graveyard during the next end phase. Also place the rest of the cards in the bottom of the deck. So think of this card like Prosperity, but specifically for traps, and it only triggers an end phase. Very great tech card for this deck, in my opinion. So that rounds out the monster lineup. Now we're going to move into the very small spell lineup. It's pretty much just triple copies of Pot of Duality. Yes, it restricts you from special summoning, but this deck doesn't special summon on your own turn. For the most part, it's usually special summoning on the opponent's turn, so the restriction that Duality puts us under doesn't hurt us. We follow that up with 1 Fossil Dig. Obviously, this is a dinosaur deck, so you're able to just play the 1 Fossil Dig is all you need. I wouldn't worry about maxing out, because the only dinosaurs you're able to search in this main deck is Theresia and Diplos. And then for the last spell, we do just play the 1 Called By again to help mitigate hand traps and just stop any pesky stuff that we might come across. Now moving on to the trap lineup. Again, this is a clean 40-card deck list, so the rest of the lineup here from here on out is strictly all purple cards, of which we are on a playset of Frenzy. Dinomorphia Frenzy is their trap that allows you to fusion summon into a Dinomorphia fusion monster. All the traps, I'm going to preface this, or most of the Dinomorphia traps at least, they require you to pay half your life as cost. Now again, that does seem counterproductive, but trust me when I say that the payoff in this deck, it's worth it in my opinion. They have an insane boss monster who's actually featured on this card's artwork. We'll talk more in detail about him when we get to the extra deck, but during your opponent's main phase, you pay half your life, fusion summon a Dinomorphia monster from your extra deck using only 1 monster from your deck and 1 monster from your extra deck as fusion material. So basically like almost like a Shaddoll fusion of sorts. Lets you fuse, and then when your opponent activates a card or effect while your life points are 2,000 or less, you can banish this card from your graveyard. You take no effect damage from your opponent's card effects this turn. So again, in case you're wondering, like, okay, well, if we're getting our life points so low, can our opponent just burn us and like sack us for game? They can try, but all the Dinomorphia normal traps have the same graveyard effect where they can banish themselves from grave while our life is 2,000 or less, and they prevent us from taking effect damage for the duration of the turn, which is obviously very strong. Follow that up with 2 copies of Domain, pretty much another like pseudo copy of Frenzy in a way. Domain allows us to fusion summon, however we fusion summon using material from the hand, field, and our main deck, whereas Frenzy lets us use material from the extra deck. Is obviously very strong. Note that these are 2 normal traps. These traps can be set by the new Aras, the Labrynth Servant, and activated on the same turn they're set, which means even if we lose the die roll and go second, we can theoretically do our full Dinomorphia combo on the opponent's turn 0, which is absolutely nuts in my opinion. Moving on, we do just play the 2 Brute. You pay half your life points, destroy a Dinomorphia you control, and 1 card your opponent controls, and then again the same graveyard effect that Frenzy and Domain had to prevent you from taking burn damage. And then 1 copy of Dinomorphia Alert, pay half your life points, special summon up to 2 Dinomorphia monsters from your grave, whose total levels equal 8 or less. They cannot declare an attack this turn, and then also we cannot special summon for the rest of the turn except Dinomorphia monsters. So pretty much an archetype reborn. And then again, same graveyard effect that Domain and Frenzy had, and Brutes to prevent us from taking burn damage, assuming our life is 2,000 or less. Now we move on to the counter traps inside the theme, of which you play 3 copies of Dinomorphia intact. Honestly, one of their best cards. When a monster effect is activated while you control a Dinomorphia card, note that it just states Dinomorphia card. So even if you just like chain like Frenzy or Domain, and that's your only face-up Dinomorphia card, and they go like Ash to try and stop you from using material from deck, you can just go chain intact, negate the Ash, and pretty much go full combo. So yeah, when a monster effect's activated while you control a Dinomorphia card, pay half your life, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that monster. Also, whenever you would take battle damage this turn, the damage taken becomes half your life points at that time. So in other words, if you activate this and it's the opponent's turn, any battle damage you take just becomes half of your life. So in other words, they're not able to kill you by battle that turn, which is really crazy, even if they're attacking you directly, which is nuts. And then the counter traps, unlike the normal traps in the theme, the counter traps all have the same graveyard effect, where if your life points are 2,000 or less, if you would take battle damage, you can banish this card from your graveyard to take no battle damage from that battle. So all the counter traps inside the theme have that graveyard effect, whereas all the normal traps in the theme have the effect to prevent you from taking burn damage. The counter traps have the effect to prevent you from taking battle damage. And then 1 copy of Dinomorphia Sonic, pretty much your standard, you know, spell trap negate. However, you do need to destroy a Dinomorphia monster you control, which sometimes you don't want to do, and that's why we just play this as a one-of, because it can be situational. And then again, the same graveyard effect as the intact. Moving on to some non-engine that we play, I think if you're playing any form of Dinomorphia, you have to be main decking triple copies of Ferret Flames. I've seen several Dinomorphia lists recently that weren't playing this card, and for the life of me, I literally don't understand why. This is probably the best deck that could run a card such as this. It's literally non-target, non-destruction removal, forces your opponent to shuffle their entire board back into the deck. Yes, it forces your opponent to do that, meaning that this card even gets around unaffected monsters as well. Basically, if the combined attack of all face-up monsters your opponent controls is more than your life points, you force them to shuffle monsters they control back into their deck, except monsters with 0 attack, so that way the remaining amount of monsters they control is equal to or less than your life. Given that this deck does nothing but get its life points as low as humanly possible, let's just assume that your life points were at 200 at time of activation. Well, if they have a board full of, you know, bullshit, for lack of a better word, you force your opponent to take all monsters they control and shuffle them back wherever they belong until they can only control monsters that have a total attack that's less than or equal to my life. And if my life is 200 in this specific example, well, they're probably not able to leave anything on their board. So in other words, this clears their field, but you force your opponent to do it themselves. So like I said, this even gets around cards that are unaffected. Also, this card is not once per turn. It blows my mind. Like, I mean, you can even if you didn't have a board, you can wait till your opponent like does battle damage to you in a worst case scenario, and like right before they're about to hit you with their finishing blow, assuming you've taken enough damage, you could probably flip a Ferret Flames and force them to shuffle all their cards back, and it just pretty much resets the game state and just gives you another chance. In some cases, this card wins you games alone, which is very, very hilarious. So a playset of Ferret Flames, I think, is a mandatory staple in any Dinomorphia list, in my opinion. Then we move that along with 2 copies of Soul of the Supreme King. I know Supreme King Zark just got support out of Agov. However, none of those cards directly influence this particular list. We are still running just the original OG Supreme King Zark in our extra deck to field this card. The reason why we run this is because it pays half our life points at activation for cost, which is obviously something Dinomorphia values greatly, and allows us to turbo out a Supreme King Zark. Although its effects are negated, it's still a 4,000 beat stick, and it has another effect where you can banish this from grave in the Zark you control, assuming the opponent activated a spell card or spell effect, and you can special summon either a Synchro Dragon, Xyz Dragon, or Fusion Dragon, or Pendulum Dragon from your hand, deck, extra deck, and or graveyard. We do play a target for this, and we'll talk about that when we get to the extra deck. Then we play 1 copy of Super Soaring. This is a new trap that came out of the Wild Survivor side set that came out earlier this year. It's a normal trap that states you target a dinosaur monster that's banished or in either graveyard and special summon it to your field. So it's pretty much a generic monster reborn for any dinosaur that's Engrave or Banished, which is very, very strong in my opinion as a one-of. Then we round that out with the one copy of Trap Tracks. Very similar to Trap Trick. Only difference is that you don't have to play duplicates of the cards, because Trap Trick forces you to banish a card with the same name. This just, you destroy a monster you control, and then you take a normal trap from your deck, set it to your side of the field. Yes, that trap can be used this turn, so we can use Trap Tracks to grab something like Super Soaring, or use it to grab either Domain, Frenzy, or any other normal trap we so see fit. And then to round out the last cards in the main is just a playset of Solemn Judgment. Obviously, this deck can play Solemn Judgment very easily. Again, them paying half their life is not really a detriment. They kind of want that to begin with, so Solemn Judgment as a 3-of makes sense in this particular list. Again, like I said, this is a 40-card list. Now we're going to run to the extra deck, of which their boss monster, 3 copies of Dinomorphia Rextrum. This is your payoff for getting your life as low as possible. This card is effectively a skill drain on legs. It reads as follows. Your opponent cannot activate the effects of monsters they control that have attack greater than or equal to my life points. Again, since this deck prides itself on getting its life to extremely dangerously low levels, your opponent, effectively, the moment they put a body on board, they are probably not going to be able to activate that card's effects, because there's a good chance that card has more attack than we have life. So yeah, the Rex is just a giant skill drain on legs on a 3k body, and if that wasn't crazy enough, as a quick effect, he can pay half our life to then make the attack of all monsters the opponent controls equal to our life. And since this effect modifies stats, you can even use it in the damage step, forcing your opponent to go battle phase and crashing into things that they are no longer able to hit over, which is very funny. Also, if Rextrum's destroyed, you can special summon a level 6 or lower Dinomorphia from the graveyard. A great boss monster in my opinion. Follow that up with 3 copies of Kentragina. Kentragina is really nice. Basically what she does is a quick effect, you pay half your life, you banish a Dinomorphia normal trap from your graveyard, and her effect becomes that trap's effect at activation. Very similar, she's kind of like an in-archetype Verte Anaconda, but exclusively for Dinomorphia traps, which is very, very cool. She also floats upon destruction into a level 4 or lower Dinomorphia. Then we play 2 Stealth Bergia. This one doesn't really come up as much, but when it's on the field, if your opponent activates a monster effect, you can burn your opponent equal to the attack of that monster. And then, which is obviously very cool. Also, while Stealthberg's on field, you do not have to pay life points while your life is 2,000 or lower. You do not have to pay life points to activate Dinomorphia effects or your trap effects, which is obviously crazy. Who doesn't want to activate Judgments for free? So 2 copies of Stealthberg. He also floats into a level 4 or lower Dino upon destruction, just like Theresia. Then we play the 1 Supreme King's Arc for our Soul of the Supreme King trap. The target that we can summon off of it is 1 copy of Crystal Clearwing Synchro Dragon. In my opinion, it's the best target for that trap because it's the only target that doesn't require any additional strings attached. Like all the other Fusion Dragon, Pendulum Dragon, Xyz Dragon cards you summon off of Soul of the Supreme King, a lot of them can't really use their effects because they either have specific summoning requirements, or in the case of the Xyz monsters, they don't have material. This is the only card you can summon, and it has all of its effects intact without any strings attached, so that's why we play it as a one-of, and it works out more than fine. You being able to turbo out a spell trap negate in a deck like this is obviously very strong. Then for our rank 4s, 1 Tornado Dragon, 1 Dolka, 1 Lagia, 1 Granosaurus Giga Cannon to round out our rank 4s. And then for the last extra deck card is 1 copy of Evilzor Lars, which again, circling back to our 2 copies of Aras the Labrynth Butler, she happens to be a level 6 monster, which means that we have easier access into going into Lars than we ever had previously. And Lars is an amazing card. Him just being an Omni Negate, but targeting any card on the field, negating its effects, is obviously very strong. So the fact that Aras can help us get into Lars much better now that we do have an additional level 6 body, it just makes it that much better. And then we'll briefly cover the side. Again, side deck's up to personal preference, but for this deck, I'm choosing to side a playset of Raw Sphere Mode, 1 copy of Pankratops for when we're going second, 2 copies of Forbidden Droplet, a great card, obviously, if you're going second to break boards, 2 copies of Cyclone, followed by the 1 Duster. Cyclone's really nice in this deck because, again, pays life, so feeding into the fact that Dinomorphia wants their life really, really low. A playset of Evenly Matched, and then we round that out with a playset of Anti-Spell Fragrance. Again, if we know we're going to go first, we can pretty much just, smoke our opponent out of the game with by preventing them from using spells. So, with the profile out of the way, let's go into, like I said, some more detail about Aras. I just want to give you a scenario. Let's say like we'd lost the die roll, we're going second. Assuming we opened like Aras and a Frenzy. It's kind of nuts because, again, even though we lost the die roll, at any point, we can quick effect, pitch the Aras from hand to grave, set the Frenzy from our hand to our side of the field. Then what we can do is we can go ahead and activate the copy of Frenzy. Let me just adjust the camera here so you guys can get a better view of the field. Then we can activate the Frenzy, because, mind you, we can activate it the turn it was set, crazily enough. And then we can go down our full Dinomorphia line, allowing us to get into a card like Rexstrom on the opponent's turn 0, before they even get a battle phase, which is obviously really cracked. So that's why we choose to run the Aras. Plus, like I said, the Aras being a level 6 monster, and Kentragina and cards like Stealthberg also being level 6, allow us to get into our copy of Evilzor Lars. We were running Lars before, but again, the only way we could go into it is assuming we had like double Kentragina, or like a Kentragina and a Stealthberg, or double Stealthberg, which, let's face it, in the grand scheme didn't really come up all that much. But now that we have an additional level 6 body, making the Lars is much easier now than it ever was before. So I think that's obviously a very good thing for this deck, in my opinion. So there's not really like combos per se. It really is just a control deck. I mean, most of the time you're going to just be like setting 4 and passing and watching your opponent kind of sweat. But I am going to do a quick pile shuffle for you guys, and we're going to just run a quick test hand, and I'll talk a little bit about, how we should play the hand, and more or less, what you should be doing when you're piling a deck like this, because there isn't a lot of room for error. This is a budget deck, which means that most people, can afford this with relative ease. But there's an upside and a downside to that. It means that most people who want to get into the game without a high cost of investment, they can play this. The problem is that a lot of those people probably aren't as well versed in the game or experienced, and this deck can be pretty punishing, especially since you kind of thread the needle as far as like, you thread that fine line between like winning and losing, because you put your life to such low amounts at certain times that any simple mistake can easily cost you the duel if you aren't careful. So this deck does reward, good pilots. Anybody can play the deck, but it takes a skilled pilot to really play it well and capitalize on the fact that, like, even though you're at very low life, you want to make sure that you don't leave yourself open for your opponent to just easily OTK you, because then that would kind of defeat the whole point. So, while this deck is budget friendly and it's pretty much pick up and play for anybody, it isn't necessarily the easiest deck to play, in my personal opinion, just because you do need to have a lot of practice with it to really learn the intricacies of how the deck can function and function well without you trying to kill yourself, for lack of a better word. So we went ahead and pile shuffled, we cut, now we're going to draw. Let's just play this out like we're going first. We got Diplos, Alert, Frenzy, Domain, and a copy of Brute. So this is an amazing hand, assuming we're going first. Even if we're going second, I mean, like, you're pretty much just going to set and then just play on their turn 3. The format is so diverse now that I really feel like a deck like this can really thrive in this type of environment. So we'll start things off by normal summoning Diplos. Upon summon, activate its effects to send a Dinomorphia card from the deck to the graveyard, of which we will probably just be sending a copy of Dinomorphia intact. The reason why we're choosing intact here is because I want to get a counter trap in the graveyard, just in case for whatever reason our opponent does stop us from fusion summoning on their turn. We don't just automatically die. We can just banish the counter trap to mitigate battle damage. You could dump a Theresia off the Diplos, but you're probably going to get Theresia off either Frenzy or Domain respectively. And the fact that we opened both of these is really nice, because that means even if they had an Ash, they can only stop one of these. So either way, we're guaranteed to get to Rex on their turn. So we're going to set the Brute, set Domain, set Frenzy, set Alert, and pass turn. And now, like I said, this deck's very reactive, but you're pretty much gonna, attempt to try and fusion summon. Even if you went Frenzy and they like chained Ash, I mean, yeah, that's really unfortunate because obviously we don't have a way to stop that with this particular hand, but it's not the be all end all. I mean, this will just go to grave, and then at resolution we could go Domain, and now since they've already Ashed, they can no longer Ash this, and then Domain will allow us to send from our deck the material required. So we'll send Diplos and Theresia from our main deck. That will allow us to go into a copy of Kentragina. Then we can go Kentragina. Again, assuming that they this is all assuming that they did Ash Frenzy. Obviously, if Frenzy resolved, the line would be a little bit different, but I'm just pretending like they Ash this. That way you guys can see that the deck doesn't necessarily die to like a single Ash. It does have lines. But now that we have both normal traps in grave, Kentragina can like use her effect to banish one of them. Let's just say we want to banish the Frenzy, and then we pay half our life again. If you've kept track at this point, we'd be at 1,000 life, if I'm not mistaken at this point, because we paid half for Frenzy for cost, half for Domain for cost, which would have brought us down to 2,000. And then assuming we go Kentragina here, banishing Frenzy, also we need to pay half for that. We should be at 1,000 life if my math is correct. But now we can go Frenzy effect. Frenzy will allow us to send a Dinomorphia from our deck to the graveyard. We'll just grab the Diplos out of the deck. And then because Frenzy allows us to send one from deck, one from extra deck, we will send one copy of Stealthburg from our extra deck to the graveyard, and that will allow us to then make the Rexstrom. At which point, like I said, we should be at 1,000 life points here, and now anything that our opponent controls that is 1,000 attack or better cannot activate its effects. And then if you think that even, they can go battle phase and try and swing over us, we can go Rex effect, pay half our life, which should bring us down to 500, and now the attack of everything the opponent controls is 500, which means even if they try to go battle into the Diplos, we could use this in the damage step. They can't redeclare, they crash into Diplos, take 500 damage, none of their monsters can beat over ours, and we pretty much have full control over this game from this point onward. We have Brute for spot removal, and Alert to recover some of our resources from the graveyard. Cards like Theresia and or Diplos we can summon back on their turn, triggering Theresia's effect to set, and you can kind of see how we snowball out of control here very quickly. Let's shuffle this back, and then we'll do another test hand real quick before we wrap things up. But hopefully you guys are enjoying the content. Like I said, Dinomorphia is a very fun deck in my opinion. At least for the person piloting it. I'm pretty sure, others would have a different opinion if they're on the receiving end of this, because sometimes this deck is pretty messed up. Like, it just doesn't... It's not very forgiving. Oops, realized that was an extra deck card. But yeah, when you're on the receiving end of this deck, sometimes I'm going to be honest, it's not that fun to play against, because it is very difficult to try and navigate the boards that this deck puts you under. And it could be very frustrating for a lot of players. But for the person piloting it, they're having the grand old time. Trust me, I can vouch for this, because my friend who does pilot this deck, he always tells me how much fun he has when playing this and how many people try to rage quit, which is funny. But anyway, we go ahead and we'll cut. And we're going to draw our starting hand. Again, we're going to play this out like we are going first. We have an Ash. We have a Ferret Flames, Dinomorphia intact, Frenzy, and another Domain. So this hand's really good even if we're going first. I mean, we pretty much have full combo again. And opening either Domain or Frenzy or Theresia guarantees that you're getting to Rex on the opponent's turn. And we also opened intact, which means even if they try to Ash either Frenzy or Domain, we can go intact to negate and destroy the Ash. Since these cards, akin to Branded Fusion, allow you the ability to use material from deck, they can unfortunately attempt to be Ashed, for those of you who were unaware. But we basically just set 4 here, hold the Ash in hand, and then again we would attempt to go do either Domain or Frenzy. And then again, if they do chain Ash, we have intact, and then they pretty much just get cooked. Because then at resolution of all this, we do get to our Rexstrom, at which point they're already floodgated, and they're going to have a pretty hard time trying to navigate the board. And if that wasn't crazy enough, we also have Ferret Flames. So even if they out the Rexstrom and they try to push for game, again, our life points are so low after we resolve our combo that Ferret Flames probably just cooks the opponent completely, and then we're able to just surmount a comeback on the crackback and probably kill them. So we'll do one more test hand before we wrap that up, because again, like I said, there isn't really like in-depth combos I can show you. I'm hoping that I can get a hand with Aras. That way you guys can, kind of get the gist of how that works. Although I don't think it's all that complicated. It should be pretty straightforward for the most part, how Aras works. But anyway, we... So the next hand, we're going to play like we're going to go second. Let's just assume the opponent's got a couple things. Again, this format's so diverse, it's hard to assume what they could be ending on, but we're going to play this out like we're going second. So we got Duality, we have Ash, Ferret Flames, another Ash, and a Brute. So assuming we're going second, this hand is fine. I mean, we have a hand trap at least to try and slow down the opponent depending on what they're playing. So we'll probably Ash them at some point. Again, they'll try and make their board, whatever, it's fine. We're going to draw for turn. Drew into another duality. That's a little unfortunate. Let's see. I mean, yes and no, because like we could try to go duality here. If they use like a negate to stop this, and if that specifically negates the activation, we can just use the second duality, which is obviously really nice. But anyway, let's just assume this resolves. We'll excavate the top 3, and then add 1 to our hand, and then place the other remaining cards, or shuffle them into the deck. In this hand, we will be grabbing the Frenzy, obviously. And then we will just be shuffling the 2 remaining cards back into the deck. Let me know down in the comments below if you guys want to see me do more live duels with this deck, or any other like combo videos and whatnot. I know a lot of people are fond of Dinomorphia. So again, assuming we were going second, then at this point we would just be setting Frenzy, setting Brute, setting Ferret Flames, holding Ash, and the duality for next turn, Ash to try and mitigate them on theirs. And like I said, at this point we just pass turn. If they don't out the Frenzy on this turn, they're probably cooked, because like once it circles back to them, we'll go Frenzy, and then we're able to just go down our entire Dinomorphia combo, getting to Rex, like I had said, and we just kind of floodgate the opponent. And again, we also have the Ferret Flames to prevent them from, you know, out grinding us or out resourcing us too crazily. But hypothetical test hand, again, because this is a card that is new to the deck, which is Aras. Let's just assume that we have an Aras. You know, we have like a Frenzy or something. Soul the Supreme King, because there's a lot of normal traps that we could like make live off of you know, the Aras. So we had like Trap Tracks, for example, or Domain. It doesn't really matter. I mean, any normal trap we run in this deck, Aras is live. So let's just assume we lost the die roll. We're going second. So at this point, because we have Aras and a bunch of normal traps, we could go Aras effect, pitch yourself from hand, set any of the normal traps that we have in our hand. Could be Frenzy to get us into Rexstrom on their turn 0. Could even be the Soul the Supreme King line if we wanted to. You know, set this. Then we can activate it this turn it was set, which again, assuming we lost the die roll, it'd be the opponent going first. So this would be on their first turn. We're able to, you know, just turbo out into our Supreme King Zark. And then at this point, if they activate a spell or spell effect, we can then banish the Zark on field and the Soul of the Supreme King in the graveyard to then summon out our Synchro. Again, keep in mind this is their turn 0, which is obviously really, really disgusting. And then at that point, you know, we would draw for turn. Doesn't matter what we draw. Like, you know, this is what I was talking about. This deck can go pretty hard once it gets the ball rolling. We would set a bunch of cards, activate duality, you know, excavate 3, probably add the Ferret Flames, shuffle the 2 Ashes back into the deck. But you guys can kind of get the gist of why Aras is so crazy. And then again, we have our full combo here. And if the opponent activates any response to any of our traps, we can then go Aras effect to special summon herself out of the graveyard, and we have a free 2500 defender on board, which is obviously very good. That can help us even make cards like the Evil Zor Lars. So that should hopefully give you a better idea as to why the Aras is so good in this deck. But with that being said, guys, this is going to wrap up the update, or the small update to my Dinomorphia list. Hopefully you guys have enjoyed the content thus far. If you're watching the video still and you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel. Like I said, we're working our way to 1,500 subs, and I need your help to get there. But with that being said, this is Nick hitting that end phase. Stay tuned for more content coming to you later this week.